1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
That's as far as Valentine, or Val, had reached before the elevator hiccuped, causing the woman to lose her concentration and start her count all over again. It was already enough that it took a great deal of willpower not to run her hands across every button in the elevator once she messed up. But now she had to finish counting the levels as she rose.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
The woman continued her count until she reached her goal and let out a sigh of relief.
You got this, Val.
She told herself, trying to fill herself with confidence. She had this. At least, that's what she tried to convince herself. She needed this job badly. When she saw the ad online, it seemed almost too good to be true. $75 an hour and a long list of benefits? While she had her doubts, a quick call to the number and a brief conversation with the woman on the other line quickly dissolved those doubts. Now, here she was, in the elevator, going up and up.
You got this.
She thought to herself when the rising room finally came to a rest. She stood straight, brushed her hair very quickly with her hand, cleared her throat, and forced a smile. Then the door opened. On the other side was a room. Blue. Shag carpet. A frosted glass window. Everything was blue.
This doesn't look like an office.
She thought to herself as she stepped away from the elevator, which quickly closed behind her. She turned around and gave a quick look as the doors shut, less worried than she should have been. She stood quiet in the blue room. Silence.
Hello?
She called out, unaware that no one was even remotely near to answer that call. That's when there was a quick static pop that caused Valentine to jump. The static sounded as if it was coming from a hidden speaker. Then, music. Ethereal. Piano. Haunting. Val looked around, completely confused at this point. The room didn't make much sense to her. It stood out. It shouldn't belong in such a nice building like this. And it wasn't just that. The design of it made her flinch, made her grind her teeth in frustration, and the urge to whistle broke through. It was too... dirty's not the word. Flawed. Her OCD did not belong here. And before she knew it, she had expelled all the air in her lungs and had to compose herself again.
Hello?
She yelled out again, this time with more concern in her voice.
Is anybody there? Hello? I have an appointment with Mr. Bagby at Cerulean Window.
No answer.
Hello?
At this point, she figured she must simply be in the wrong place. Wrong level. So, she turned and went back to the elevator door, pressed the button, and waited. Yet nothing happened. She pressed it again, and again. Each time the button yielded no results. It didn't even light up.
Oh, great. Just my luck. Right when I have an interview.
Val, instead, began to look for another door to the stairwell. Every building had to have one per regulation, yet the more she looked around, the more lost she became. There was no obvious door, no sign, no stairs, just a big blue room that opened up to more blue rooms. that opened to even more blue rooms.
What the hell?
She finally said, giving in to the frustration.
Hello?
And again, there was no answer. Just quiet. And, well, the music. Valentine finally pulled her cell phone from her pocket, dialed the number for the office, avoiding the urge to count the numbers on her phone, and held it up to the side of her face. She took a deep breath.
God damn it.
She mumbled to herself, expelled the air out of her lungs, breathed deep, and tried again. Annoyed, she tucked the phone away and began a more thorough search. 10 minutes passed. 20, 30. She was already late, which set off a chain reaction of annoyed ticks. Maybe she should call again. She began to groan even louder as she opened door after door after door. All blue rooms, shag carpeting, frosted windows.
What even is this place?
Her curious mind wondered, and she wandered from room to room.
Who would design something like this, and why in this building?
It had looked so nice from the outside. So fancy. Val finally reached a room that was different from the rest. Blue as always, but this one had a doorway filled with rubble. Big chunks of bluish white stone that didn't match the surrounding area.
What the hell? Why?
She let out a deep sigh and slowly began to move the stones one by one, which took even longer. 40 minutes now had passed. 50. She finally made it through and was greeted with another room, with another door, filled with more rubble.
Oh, come on!
She finally yelled out loud, enough to drown out the looping music. She spent another 20 minutes, now over an hour, ridding herself of the obstacles that blocked her path. Then she stepped into the next room. It was the same as the last two. At this point, the woman pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She couldn't think of anything else to do. The phone rang and rang, and then rang again, and then...
Hello?
Spoke the voice on the other end. Valentine froze in place. There was something about the voice, something in it that caused her blood to freeze. Something about the person who spoke the words. Goosebumps rose across both her arms, and the hair on the back of her neck stood. She struggled to respond, finding herself even unable to.
I can hear you breathing. I know you're there. And I'm coming for you. Welcome to the Blue Room.
Valentine quickly hung up.
What the hell was that?
She wondered aloud and put the phone away. The music stopped again. The silence heavy in the loop before it started back up. She looked around. It started to finally sink in. There was something off, wrong. And it wasn't just this place. It was in the air, the atmosphere. She could feel it. Everything here felt unnatural. The music invading her ears, picking at her brain. The same tune, but it felt even more off this time.
Hello? Can someone please help me? I'm lost. Someone? Please.
Same as always, no one answered. Her fear-laced voice dampened by the shag carpeting. Hours had passed in the blue room. Valentine had tried everything she could in every room. Any option presented to her to escape. She even tried shattering one of the frosted windows, but the glass held strong, stronger than it should be. Not one crack. Her frustration began to take from her breath as she struggled to keep her lungs filled. Every fail meant deflation of her lungs. She was now shaking and sweating as she fumbled around this place, the music never-ending and following her no matter where she went. She was nearly on the verge of tears when she entered one room and found in it a chair, a solid white chair, and nailed to that chair was a single page, aged, yellow, and fragile. She moved quickly to pick it up, tearing it slightly when she removed it, but the words remained legible. Valentine began to read. Dear reader, if you are reading this note, then you find yourself in the same predicament which ensnared me many nights ago. My name is Atticus. The day is, or was, the 12th of April, though I confess I am no longer certain, for the sun does not seem to set in this place. The year is 1912. I am, or was, a humble cobbler by trade. I had just finished the day's work and was bound for home when, upon stepping through my own front door, I found myself here instead. I do not know what manner of place this is, only that it is most unnatural. My door ought not to have led me here, yet it did, and now I am trapped. I have wandered these blue rooms for what feels an age. I grow hungry, thirst gnaws at my bones, yet still I stand, still I move. I have found a way out of this first set of rooms. You must heed the wind. It does not blow aimlessly. Its flow will guide you to the next place, the hallway of doors. But take heed. This is but the beginning. There is still a great distance to go. I hope this letter grants you some measure of advantage, spares you some time. I pray for you, for your escape, should Providence allow it. God bless you, reader. Atticus. That was it. Valentine turned the page over to the back. Nothing.
Follow the wind?
She muttered to herself and began looking around. Her eyes stopped when she spotted the ventilation system in the corner. Small blue ribbons blew gently and quietly with the nearby undetectable breeze. She turned to see where the ribbons pointed. Another door blocked with rubble. Val grumbled, rolled up her sleeve, and got to work. The note had been right. Atticus had been right. She stumbled through the rubble and stepped out into a brand new room. This one was clean. The shag carpeting had been replaced with a deep blue marble. Her heels clicked against it with a slight echo with each step. Before her was a new door as well. She couldn't help but smile as she opened the door and stepped out. Valentine now stood in a long hallway, unnumbered doors dotting the walls down the entire length of it. She looked back and forth, trying to decide which way to go. She didn't see any vents, felt no gentle gust of wind.
Well, shit. I guess I'll just have to choose a direction.
At first, she walked, slow, occasionally checking rooms as she wondered. Each room was the same, yet also different. some of the changes were small, some were big. One room was completely empty. One had several chairs in a circle. The next had a dead crow laying in its center. Another, a pile of vomit in the corner, reeking far worse than anything she had ever smelled. And then there was one room that pulled from her a sigh of relief when she opened it, for greenery filled the interior. The plants grew out of the ground in walls like an invasive species of ivy. The structure of the room itself, quite different than the others, fancier. Her eyes focused on the figure she hadn't noticed slumped against the wall and stepped forward, her mouth opening to speak. But upon approach, she let out a yelp of surprise. The person was dead. Long dead, a skeleton wearing old, faded clothes. He wore a backpack and an outdoor outfit, dressed as if for a hike. Valentine thought about calling the police again, even had the phone in her hand. But after thinking how the last call went, she decided against it. For now. Valentine begrudgingly reached for his pack and pulled it away from the remains of the poor man. At least she thought it was a man. And after going through his things, confirmed it had indeed been a man after finding his journal. The first dozen or so pages documented several species of birds and plants, and accompanying them were multiple highly detailed drawings. But the journal suddenly turned into worrisome thoughts put to paper. The man's name had been Dougie. He had indeed been on a hike, and during that hike, felt the call of nature, and instead of dropping his pants in the woods, waited until he came across an outdoor bathroom. The man had stepped through, and suddenly found himself here. There were several more entries going over his confusion that eventually became panic before she reached the last page. Dougie, unfortunately, had cut himself quite badly on a shard of glass somewhere and couldn't stop the bleeding. The woman had to admit to herself, now, in full, that this place was beyond something natural or even unnatural. Supernatural. It was easy to convince herself of this because the more she wondered, the more she could just feel it. Plus, it was pretty obvious with the layout. The floor just simply kept going. And going. Now, in possession of the hiker's backpack and everything in it, a hunting knife, a flashlight, an emergency tent and blanket, and enough snacks and water for a day, she stepped back out into the hallway of doors. She looked back the way she came, then down the path that she chose to walk.
Okay, let's do this.
Valentine began walking. This time, her pace much quicker, which after searching more rooms, became a jog, and then a run. Door after door, room after room. Most yielded nothing of interest. Most empty. The hallway around her began to expand and grow, even the doors, as if she were shrinking as she ran down the blue tunnel. Her heart began to beat, faster and faster to keep up with her panic. She just ran and ran, looking around for any vents, yet seeing none. She was tired. So tired. Eventually, she simply had to stop. She had to take a break. She needed to sleep. Val began to search for a room that seemed safe enough, and just as she was about to give up, she opened one door, about to shut it, and then heard a noise, which caused her to stop in her tracks, her hand still gripping the brass doorknob. This room, like the other rebel rooms, same frosted glass window, but this one.
Hello?
She whimpered out as she stepped further into it. exhausted.
Is someone there?
She could hear children. The sound of children playing on the other side of the window, which of course made no sense because she had to be on one of the highest floors of this building, assuming it was even a part of the building. She gave up on trying to figure out where exactly she was, at least for now. Val spoke out again and even knocked on the window. There was a brief moment before slowly a small figure cautiously made their way to the other side. She couldn't see the details of their face, but judging by the size, could tell they were a child.
Is someone there?
They spoke from the other side, their voice muffled. Valentine felt a surge of relief at the sight and sound and smiled wide.
Oh, thank God. I thought I was the only one in here. Please, can you help me?
The child swayed slightly and their head tilted before they responded.
Are you real?
They asked.
Yes, of course I'm real.
She told them and placed her hand to the glass. And after a single second, the child pressed their hand to theirs from their side.
You're real. You're really real. Do you know what's going on? Do you know where we are? We're in the blue room. That's all I know. You're in a different part of it, somewhere I can't reach. I don't understand. What is the blue room? What is this place? How is this place real? I don't know. How long have you been here? I don't know. I don't remember. I was walking home from school. Someone grabbed me and put me in a car. I couldn't see. I remember hearing the police sirens behind them as they drove. They kept saying bad words, the same words my dad would say, but got mad when I said them once. The man took me from the car and ran into a building. He left the door open. I remember hearing the cop yelling out. I remember escaping from the bad man, running, hiding, and...
The child went quiet again.
Are you really real? Yes, I am.
And then a horrifying thought invaded her mind.
Are we dead?
The child paused for even longer.
I really hope not. What's your name? Lark.
The child told her.
What's yours? My name is Valentine, or Val for short. It's nice to meet you, Valentine. I like that name. I like yours too.
Valentine couldn't help but smile a bit. She was just glad to have someone to talk to.
I hope you survive this place, Valentine. I hope you escape. I do too, Lark. Do you know a way out? Is there an exit somewhere?
Valentine waited for an answer, but the child pulled his hand back and slowly stepped away. Valentine could hear a low rumble and started to hear small taps as rain began to fall from Lark's side of the window.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I have to go.
The boy quickly turned and vanished. The foggy handprint he left slowly faded. It had been 3 days since Valentine met Lark. 3 long days. She had spent the night in that same room, listening to the sounds of the rain, which soothed her. It always had. She had gorged herself on Dougie's expired trail mix and chugged the entire bottle of water, whispering curses when she finished it. She probably should have tried to make it last, but she was so thirsty.
Atticus was right. The sun never sets here.
The same thought looping in her head that whole first night. The next day, she took her time as she explored, opening doors she pretended her gut feeling told her to open. But like most of the others, these rooms contained nothing of interest. The woman walked and walked and walked. The hallway continued, kept going and going and going. Another day of wondering. 2 days. Her body simply moved on autopilot now, one foot in front of the other, walking and walking, turning doorknobs, looking inside, nothing, and nothing, and nothing, and...
Wait. Oh my God.
Valentine stepped into the room. Her smile returned and she collapsed to her knees.
Water!
The room resembled that of an apartment room, or maybe a motel. It didn't matter. What mattered was the water. It poured from holes in the ceiling, leaks everywhere. Outside was a rainstorm. The trees beyond swayed violently with the wind as it rocked the sliding glass window. Val quickly ran up to the nearest leak, filled Dougie's bottle, and drank. And filled it again, and drank again. She continued this until she felt as if she would burst, finally taking a moment to collapse onto the slightly damp couch pushed up against the wall.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
She whispered as she fell back, sprawling her legs out and let the comfort of the couch pull her in. She sank into it, sank into a deep, deep sleep. Valentine didn't dream that night, but she did rest. She woke with a start at the clap of thunder outside and sat up straight. She looked around the room, water pooling lightly across the kitchen floor, soaking into the blue shag carpet. The wallpaper peeled away, and mold bloomed on the wall behind. Val stood up and ran to the kitchen pantry, throwing open the doors, the fridge, pulling every drawer all the way out, one of them dropping and landing on Valentine's foot with a painful thud, which caused the woman to jump in place and brace herself against the slippery counter. She screamed, biting her tongue and gritting her teeth. Luckily, the pain went away quickly as she continued to search. Finally, one door showed mercy. When she flung the closet door open, she let out a gasp of both surprise and shock. Inside were dozens of jars containing pickled foods and eyeballs, tongues, lizards. She would have felt even more disgusted if that's all it had been, but the jars of food brought a comfort that outweighed the horrors of the others. Or maybe Valentine was just desensitized by now. Regardless, the woman popped open the nearest jar in front of her, pickled asparagus, and scarfed it down.
Oh my God, that's so good.
She mumbled with a full mouth, the sudden taste causing a common sharp pain and pleasure. When she finished, she moved on to the next one, a jar of pickled cauliflower. She ate every single bite, even drinking the juice, knowing the brine would probably give her an upset stomach and heartburn. But the woman didn't care. She was full now, on pickled foods and water leaking from the roof above. She sprawled back out onto the couch. She looked out the window, watched the trees sway in the storm. Occasionally, one of their branches leaned close enough to scratch the window violently, or give it a gentle tap. After a few more minutes, she decided to take a shower and placed her clothes into a wicker basket she found. The water was cold, but so refreshing and constant. Afterwards, she washed her dirty clothes, using a single bar of soap she had found in the kitchen. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. She found herself whistling as she worked, and when she finished, felt the churn of the meal in her stomach.
God, I hope there's toilet paper.
She mumbled to herself and let out a sigh of relief when she found the bathroom remained untouched by the water damage. Val relieved herself and returned to the living room. She sat down on the couch and stared back out the window. After a while, she decided to try her phone again.
Maybe I can get a signal here.
Over the past few days, she had tried multiple times to call multiple different numbers. None of them worked, and her battery was beginning to die. She had to be careful now when deciding to use it. She dialed her sister's number again.
I don't understand. I don't get it. How can a place like this exist?
Where was she exactly? In between worlds? An alternate universe? What is the Blue Room? The longer she stayed in this room, the more comfortable she got. Yet at the same time, the more she began to fall into a spiral of depression. She found it harder and harder to get out of bed. She would wander the halls, only to find herself returning to this room. The Room of Tears, she called it. That name holding more meaning than she thought it would. Each day, she would feel an overwhelming feeling of hopelessness and despair, giving up on any dreams of escaping this place. She would break down, collapse into the pooling water, and cry, and cry. Her tears mixing with the liquid below, her hope draining away with the water through the cracks in the ground. It had been a week now. No, longer than a week. Maybe even a month since she had entered the blue room. This room. She wasn't even trying anymore. She was no longer fighting. She just lay there on the couch, surrendering to her fate. Until one day, Valentine ignored the first knock. She struggled to pull her head up and look outside. Standing there, just on the other side of the window, was Lark. Valentine felt a sudden surge of energy as she bolted up and ran over to the door, pulling on it with all of her strength to open. Yet it didn't budge. She motioned for the kid to move and tried to break the glass with a cast iron pan from the kitchen. But just like the other windows, not a scratch.
I can't open the door, Lark.
She yelled to the soaking child on the other side. He shook his head as violently as his body shook in the cold, lashing rain.
You can't do it!
He yelled over the storm as thunder shook the window and lightning flashed.
No one can!
Lark, what do I do?
Leave! Get out of that room now! It might have water, but the room drains you of your will. Get out of there, now!
Hearing the child say this, his voice filled with fear for her, was all she needed to finally snap out of her spiral. She quickly gathered her things and started for the door, before she turned back one more time.
What about you?
She asked, genuinely worried for the boy. She could see him smile through the glass, the first time she could see him in clear detail. He had gentle, tired eyes, feathery brown hair, and wore simple clothing. He placed his hand on the window again, and she did the same.
It doesn't matter. I think it's too late for me. I think I've been here too long. But you have a chance. But you need to get out of here soon. Find the blue city. Find the tallest building, the one that touches the clouds. I heard there might be an exit there.
The boy lingered for a moment, shaking from the cold rain.
This will be the last time we'll see each other. I can't go back to the city again. I just can't. Get out of here, Valentine. For me. And watch out for Nightingale.
With that final warning came the loudest crack of thunder and a blinding flash of lightning. And then Lark was gone. Nowhere to be seen. Valentine roamed the hallways again, walking the same direction again, sticking with the pattern of opening doors every once in a while to have a look-see. Most empty as usual. Each time she reached for a door, she was disgusted at the length of her fingernails that clicked and clacked against the wood and brass. Eventually, when she had a moment where her OCD finally took over, she pulled Dougie's hunting knife from her side and slowly sawed away at the length of her nails until she was as satisfied as she could be. When she opened one door, the only thing inside was a hand mirror, which she used to give herself a quick glance. Her reflection was flawed, her hair tangled, her lips chapped. She tried to run her fingers through her hair like she usually did when she was nervous, but they got caught. and after a moment she gave up. She left the colorful hairpin in that mess she called hair, pocketed the mirror in Dougie's backpack, and continued. Walking. And walking. And finally, the hallway turned. Valentine eased around the corner, peeking slightly around to make sure it was safe before continuing. This hallway was new. No doors, but instead, paintings everywhere. Simple ones at first, the kind you would find in hotels. Then they became more artistic, more surreal, more horrifying, more violent. She began to ignore them as she walked, and walked, and finally, she reached the end of the hallway. And there stood a single door, but it was vibrating, leaking water. She could hear the thunder and see through the cracks of it the flash of lightning. And then the door began to bend and bend and... The door flew off its hinges and narrowly missed Valentine as she barely managed to sidestep it, but couldn't avoid the rushing wave of water that came through. It swept her off her feet and began to carry her back down the hall, back the way she came. Valentine struggled to stay afloat and reached out blindly for something to grab. And as she came back around the corner with the curling, crashing wave, she managed to grab a hold of one of the door frames. Her fleeting strength barely managing to keep her from floating away. It was all she could do to hold on. Just hold and hold as the water level began to rise, and she finally had to let go. She glanced around for some way to escape the drowning hall, her eyes searching and searching, finally finding a skylight above, and noticed it was open. She had to wait for the water to rise even higher and higher, keeping herself afloat, but just barely. Finally, the time came when she had to begin swimming back, the water pushing her under. She held her breath as she swam, keeping her eyes open, dodging the blurry objects floating past, paintings, chairs, and finally she emerged. She was directly under the skylight, but she couldn't quite reach. She had to duck under, press her feet against the ground, and shoot off like a torpedo, flying out of the water and barely managing to grip the edge of it with the tips of her fingers, and pulled. With all the strength she pulled, scared of losing her grip, and with it, the last bit of her hope, picturing herself falling under, her lungs filling with water, flooded. Her fears were suddenly replaced with a victorious shout when her feet connected with the top of the doorframe, and using that last ounce of strength, the woman pulled herself up and out. She laid there. For a long time she laid there, with her eyes closed, just breathing and crying and cheering. And finally, she opened her eyes. Above her, floating high in the open blue sky, was a colossal wave of cumulus cloud. She just stared at it, admiring the beauty of it. And finally she stood. Valentine wandered over to the edge of the building she stood on and looked out over the infinite expanse of the Blue City. Valentine had found an old rusty fire escape that threatened to bend and peel away from the building as she descended, but her current weight was just enough to reach the bottom safely. She was unaware of how lucky she was. Her weight loss in the blue room saved her life. When her bare feet hit the warm concrete ground, she let out a sigh of relief and fell to her knees, kissing the ground below.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It felt so good to be standing outside on the streets, even if they were completely empty. Quiet. Just like the rest of the city. The woman walked out of the alley and on to the main road. She looked up and down the street, then up at the buildings around her. It was so quiet. So still, as if the whole world were dead.
I don't like that.
She muttered to herself before she began walking again.
Okay. Look for the tallest skyscraper. Where are you?
She had forgotten to take a moment to look for it while she was on the roof, but refused the climb back up. And for good reason. The city itself, like everything else, was a shade of blue. Blue as the sky above, and empty. Not just empty, but clean. So clean. She had never seen such clean streets before. The streets in New York were absolutely filthy, filled with trash and grime and muck and unclean people. But here, it was spotless. Spotless enough to kiss the streets. She strolled right down the center of them, following the yellow lines in the road, the only other color besides the green of the planted trees around her. Eventually, Val stopped in her tracks and decided to call a number on her phone again. And it rang.
Oh my God.
She could barely contain her excitement. It rang and rang and...
Hello? Val? Oh my God, Val! Are you okay? Where are you?
Her sister's worried voice came from the other side.
Alice! Oh my God! Holy shit! You picked up!
Valentine fell into the bench on the side of the road and held her head in her hands, putting the phone on speakerphone.
Val, are you okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm okay. Or at least I will be. Oh my God, Alice, I can't believe you answered.
What the hell happened to you? You've been missing for 7 months.
Valentine sat up straight and felt her heart skip a beat.
7 months? I've been gone for 7 months?
It had felt shorter than that. Or maybe longer. She didn't know. Couldn't tell.
Valentine, where are you?
Alice asked her sister again, but before she could answer, static filled her phone and there was a loud pop, followed by heavy breathing. And then...
There you are.
came a voice. The same voice. The one Valentine heard the day she stepped into the blue room, when she had dialed 911.
I know where you are, little bird. And I'm coming.
The line suddenly went dead, and Valentine felt the goosebumps return. She stood up quickly and began looking up and down the street again, this time searching for a hidden threat. She quickly decided to get off the street and hide somewhere, anywhere. She ran into the nearest building. When she stepped inside, it appeared to be the lobby of a hotel. It was clean, spotless as the streets outside. She ran over to one of the doors in the back and stepped inside, shutting it behind her. When Val turned around, she saw that she was in a break room. A long wooden table dominated the room, sitting at the center. Not a speck of dust on its surface. She could see a coffee pot in the back, resting next to a small wicker basket filled with creams, sugars, and packets of coffee, both beans and instant. She didn't hesitate. She ran over, ripped open a packet of sugar, poured it into her mouth, and chewed on the grains of sugar crystals. Repeating the process with the coffee, she closed her eyes and swirled the flavors around in her mouth, her saliva creating the drink she had missed so badly.
Oh, my sweet Lord, that's good.
She quickly pocketed the rest of it and even mixed some into one of the jars of water she had collected from the Room of Tears. A search for food led to disappointment, but she did find in the corner a small aquarium, several fish still swimming around. She didn't question how they were alive, but simply reached in, grabbed one, and swallowed it whole. She made an audible sound of disgust, not just from the taste, but the feeling of it squirming its way down her throat, and even still as it sat in her stomach.
Oh, that's so gross.
She decided to chew the next one. Worse than before, taste-wise, but at least it wasn't moving anymore. Just as she finished them off, she heard it.
What was that?
She froze in place. Her panicked thoughts instantly went to some kind of hidden alarm she must have set off. She waited. It wasn't until she heard it again when she realized what it was. The woman carefully opened the door and peeked outside. Driving slowly by, outside the hotel window, was a police car, patrolling the streets. Now, Valentine should have known better. Normally, she would. She would have been able to piece together the puzzle. But in her current state, her gut warning gave in to the false hope she felt. Before she knew it, Val was running out the front door and into the street, shouting and waving her hands, begging the car to stop and turn. And it did. The wheels spun around. The car came slowly towards her and stopped. Valentine could feel her smile return, but that quickly went away when the officer stepped out of his vehicle. His skin was pale white, whiter than any human being should be. His hair, even whiter, even more tangled than her own. His grin, wider than any smile she ever wore. And his eyes. His eyes were literally glowing blue. Behind him, he dragged a sledgehammer, the sound as gnarly as fingernails on a chalkboard. The sound and the sight caused her to expel the air in her lungs as she took a cautious step back. And then the police officer stopped. His head tilted to the side, and he clicked his tongue. He didn't say a word. Just pulled his taser from its holster, aimed, and fired. Valentine felt a surge of electrical energy, and her body tightened up, locked into place, and the woman fell to the ground. Hard. She felt the back of her head strike the pavement with a sickening thud, and before she knew it, the man's shadow blocked out the blue sun behind him. She was barely able to focus her mind enough to read his homemade name tag. Nightingale. He stood over her as she twitched, lifted his foot, and brought it down into her face with a crunch.
Hey, lady. You okay?
Valentine heard the voice before she fully woke. Her head was pounding, and her lip was split and swollen. Her vision was blurry, and it took a moment for her eyes to focus on the figure who spoke. There, in front of her, was a man, different from the cop that attacked her, different from Nightingale. He had shaggy black hair, a black beard, and dark brown eyes. He wore a leather vest with a white tank top underneath, and a pair of jeans held up by a black belt. A metal chain spilled from one of his pockets that his fingers fumbled with.
You look like you took a hell of a hit.
Uh, um, oh, where am I?
The police station. It looks like Nightingale got a hold of you. Caught me a couple days ago trying to cross the park. Bad spot. Wasn't really anywhere to run or hide when he spotted me.
The man told her as he leaned forward, extending his hand.
Name's Miles.
Valentine just stared at his hand, still too out of it to greet him properly. The man pulled his hand back and gave her an inquisitive stare.
You look like you were in the middle of a business meeting when the Blue Room got you. Am I right?
What? I was going for a job interview. The elevator brought me here.
Damn. Never heard of an elevator doing it. I was trying to rob a place myself. Broke in through the window into the rich bastard's study. Got a bag full of trinkets and whatnot. Just trying to leave through the window I came from, and that was it. Now here I am.
Valentine looked around the cell she was in and then back through the bars. The station was the opposite of the city. It was an absolute mess. Random objects and spoiled food were scattered all around. Toys balancing on the edges of counters and unknown liquids spilled into pools. The sight of it made Valentine cringe and expel the breath in her lungs. Everywhere was the word Nightingale carved into the surfaces, the desk, the walls, the ceiling, the floor. And sitting on the floor, leaning against the desk, was Dougie's backpack. Valentine shifted in place and finally stood, wobbling slightly.
We need to get out of here. I know of an exit. In the tallest skyscraper. If we get out of here, we can find it.
Hold on. You know how to escape this place. How? How long have you been here?
Too long. A few months. A little boy named Lark told me.
A child? There's children stuck in this place? God damn, I can't imagine how you managed to survive here. I've barely managed. You wouldn't believe the things out there. Straight up nightmares. Look, if you're right, then we need to work together to get out.
Before Valentine could respond, the sound of a door opening somewhere out of sight in the room caused them both to cease the conversation. Val held her breath as the footsteps slowly revealed Nightingale, who came around the corner, his smile as wide as before.
Little birds caught in a cage. Two little birds trapped in their rage. Two little birds that don't quite belong. Two little birds singing the same song.
Nightingale spoke in an almost whimsical tone, yet buried under that whimsy was a more sinister one. His wicked teeth caught the light as he stepped forward and pressed his face in between the bars of their cage.
You think there's hope for you? You really think so? Still clinging to the idea of finding a way to escape this place? No. No, see, nobody ever escapes this place. Trust me, I've tried.
Valentine had backed away from the bars, putting as much distance between herself and Nightingale, but still spoke up.
Why did you attack me? Aren't you a cop?
Used to be. In another life. Used to be a hero. Not anymore.
He pulled his face back and strolled over to an old-fashioned record player. The man pressed a button and carefully placed the needle onto the spinning record. The music that came through was warped and wrong, an oldie from times long past, but unpleasant in every way. Nightingale began snapping his fingers to the tune and spun around on his heels.
And I took you both. Because, well, I get kind of lonely here. All alone. I've wanted some new friends for as long as I can remember. Don't remember the last time I spoke to someone face to face. Maybe that woman I found with the broken leg. Spoke no English, but that didn't matter. Just love hearing the sounds of another human being. Unfortunately, though, she didn't make it. I'm a cop, not a doctor. Anyways, now you two are here. Just my luck, too. Two at once. Healthy. And in good shape. Well, mostly. Sorry about the lip there, little birdie.
Valentine reached up and touched her lip, the pressure stinging a bit and caused her to wince. Miles stepped forward.
Look, Nightingale, it doesn't have to be like this anymore. Valentine here found a way out. We can all escape together. She knows where the exit is.
There is no exit.
But there is. Lark said,
What was that? What did you just say? Say that name again.
Lark?
Valentine repeated. Nightingale stepped back, his face flashing through a series of emotions, his hands ripped away from the bars, and the cop staggered in place for a moment. And when he returned, he looked different, more normal, more human.
Where is he? Is he okay?
Valentine didn't know how to respond. She was in shock at the sudden change in demeanor, but she still had no clue how to answer that question.
I don't know. He's trapped. Somewhere beyond the windows.
This caused the man to suddenly shift back into his monstrous form, Nightingale, pale and terrifying as ever.
Oopsie daisy. Got a little peek behind the curtain. Won't let that happen again. No, see, there is no escape. And the sooner you figure that out, the better. Just stay here. We'll be the best friends. Maybe one day we'll trust each other enough and I'll be able to let you both outside of your cage. We can go on adventures, make some brownies. Ooh, and Christmas. Christmas is going to be so much more fun with the two of you here. Last view, well, I don't want to talk about that.
Nightingale stepped away, adjusted his gun belt, and spun the keys in his hand.
No escape. Stop thinking like that. Get comfy. I'll be back in a bit. Spotted a boat cruising down by the channel. If we're lucky, we'll make this a home party. Back in a jiffy. Toodaloos!
And with that, the famous Nightingale turned and left the room, the door slamming shut behind him. Val spun around and faced Miles.
You said you were breaking into a place when you wound up here, right? You're good at picking locks?
Well, yeah. But I don't have anything on me, otherwise I would have done so by now.
Valentine quickly reached up into her hair, her fingers struggling to move through the tangled mess, and retrieved her hairpin. She handed it over to Miles.
Will that work?
Doubtful. It's not like the movies. In theory, yes, I could pick a lock with these. I mean, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Don't keep your fingers crossed, though. The chances of it working are slim to none.
But the man worked. He continued to twist it around, reshape the hairpin, tried again and again. And when he gave up, Valentine coaxed him into another series of attempts. And finally, the lock yielded with a heavy, tired click, opening with a sigh.
Holy fucking shit. I feel like that shouldn't have worked.
Are you actually complaining? Come on! Let's go!
The two of them exited, quickly grabbed their things, and ran out the back door of the police station and into the alley. The clean air greeted them with a cooling breeze, and behind them, as they ran, the echoing, scratching record continued to loop. Again and again. Miles and Valentine had put the distance between them and their captor, enough so to finally give them the feeling of freedom they sought, to finally have a moment to breathe. The two of them had made their way to a building big enough to get a good view from the roof. From the roof, they could see their target, the tallest building in the city, about 10 miles away. As they descended back through the car parking lot, they found one vehicle, a Jeep, in near mint condition, were it not for the large scratch down one side and a broken headlight. Yet it was filled to the brim with gas. Inside the glove compartment was a note, another page torn from the journal of Atticus himself. Dear reader, in my day I did catch sight of a few of these horseless carriages, and spent many an idle moment lost in daydreams. Were I a rich man, I might have driven one myself, instead of remaining but a poor cobbler. Alas, that was never to be my fate. And yet here I stand in this strange new world, surrounded by these automobiles. The irony is not lost on me. For all these years, I have not the skill to drive them well, even with decades of practice. I remain a terrible driver. So I have set myself to a different task. I have scattered several of these machines throughout the Blue City. A great undertaking, not without some sacrifice to the vehicles themselves. It is my hope they might aid those as unfortunate as myself. I pray that any soul in need might find them and that they hasten your travels. I have filled each one with what fuel I could gather and tried my best to keep them intact. God bless you, reader. And good luck. Atticus.
That was abnormally lucky. Thanks, Atticus.
Miles thanked their unseen guide before climbing behind the wheel. He turned the key and drove down the ramp, following the spiral of the building. The Jeep pulled out into the street and began following the coast. The reason being because one building in particular had fallen over and was blocking a large section of the inner city roads, and instead of turning around and risking a confrontation with Nightingale, they chose instead to add a few extra miles to their drive. So they drove and drove, eventually reaching a good spot to pull over for the night. It appeared to be a seaside restaurant called Low Tide Grill. Miles had parked the Jeep behind the building and even took the extra steps of covering it up with an old tarp. The blue sun never set, but the team of two hunkered down for the night. The inside was empty. Not a speck of food to be found. Just bottles of alcohol, which Miles turned several into homemade Molotov cocktails, just in case. Val had decided to explore a couple of the rooms in the back, and found one to be filled with rats, and a beautiful bay window overlooking the sea. But still, there were rats. She gagged and exhaled her breath at the sight of them, and instantly felt the urge to wash her hands in the bathroom sink. Miles had found another room that appeared to be some kind of living room, with a roaring cerulean fire already going in the fireplace. The room itself seemed a little too fancy for the vibe of the rest of the restaurant. Most likely a piece of some fancy home brought here by the powers of the Blue Room. Inside the room was another note held down by an expensive paperweight. Another page from Atticus's journal. Dear reader, if you have made it this far, then you ought to be proud. You are so very close now, only a few miles yet to go. But take heed. Be careful, be cautious, ever aware of your surroundings. And for the love of Almighty God, watch yourself for Nightingale. That wretch is more dangerous than you might ever reckon. You surely know this by now, and if you are fortunate, then perhaps you do not. Use what this place gives you, make use of the fire I built, and though I know it is no man's first choice, you must eat the rats. There are plenty of the creatures, and they cook quickly enough. But see to it that they are cooked well. I would not have you come so far to freedom only to perish from some fever in your gut. Use whatever means you must to secure your escape, teeth and nails if that's what it takes. Good luck, dear reader, and God bless you. Atticus. When Miles finished reading the letter, Val turned away in disgust.
I'm not eating rats.
You're hungry, aren't you?
Yeah, but...
Yeah, but nothing. Look, I'll do the killing and cleaning and cooking. You just keep an eye out for flashing blue and red lights. You see Nightingale? You give a shout. We'll rain fire down on that monster if he pokes his head around here.
Miles told her before getting to work. The man borrowed a frying pan from the kitchen and opened the door to the rat room, shutting it quickly behind him. For the next 5 minutes, all Valentine could hear from the room was the sounds of grunting, smashing, and squeaking, occasionally cursing. And after a moment of silence, the door opened and out walked Miles with a handful of rats. Valentine gagged and blew the air through her teeth. She flexed her fingers over and over and began rapping them nervously against the restaurant's bar with a tap-tap-tapping sound. Miles cleaned and cooked the rats as best as he could and presented the food to Val, who responded with,
Yum. That looks so good. Blech.
Sleep had come surprisingly easy for them both due to the sound of the waves outside, and despite them taking turns on watch, the night remained uneventful. They skipped a rat breakfast and instead loaded up into the Jeep. Miles took the wheel again and began to drive and drive. They were almost to their destination when Miles glanced back in the rearview mirror.
Oh, shit. It's him. It's Nightingale.
Valentine spun around and could see far behind them, but gaining speed and distance, was the police car that could belong to none other than the monster himself. The flashing lights and siren blared, echoing through the empty city around them. Without Miles having to tell her, Val began to light the Molotov cocktails, turned and threw the first one. It exploded against the street in liquid fire that coated the ground and splashed the oncoming car, yet did nothing to slow it down. She tried again, this time the bottle flying far over her target.
Shit!
She screamed out in frustration. She had the third one ready when Nightingale pulled up behind them, fast, ramming the Jeep and causing it to sway before Miles gained control again. Val almost dropped the explosive cocktail, burning her hand badly, but catching it. She winced in pain and mainly instinctively tossed the bottle just to get rid of the burning sensation. But this time, it flew true. The bottle shattered against the front window of Nightingale's cruiser, causing the entire car to erupt with molten flame that dripped away from the vehicle as it began to lose control. Nightingale, with one last attempt, slammed the gas, clipping the Jeep and causing it to spin out. Before they knew it, the vehicle flew through the front doors of the second tallest skyscraper and came to a screeching stop inside. The two of them both jumped out quickly and began to run, just as the flaming patrol car came barreling after them. It chased them down the long marble hallway, threatening to run them over if their pace slowed in the slightest, until Miles yanked Val into a side door. The car barely missed her as she fell in.
Go! Run!
Miles told her and pulled the woman to her feet. The team of two began to move up the stairs as quickly as possible and could hear the door open below and the feet moving after them. An occasional gunshot echoed through as Nightingale took desperate but inaccurate shots with his handgun. They were eventually forced to head onto the only floor they could when the stairs leading up turned to rubble. Valentine and Miles quickly looked around and found something to block the door, but also found they had reached a dead end. They decided to hide, to ambush Nightingale. Moments passed, their hearts thumping loudly in their ears and in their chests. And then... Nightingale broke through the door with his sledgehammer, pushing the failed barricade aside. He stepped through and staggered in place.
Boy, you really made me work for this one. I just gotta ask, why are you running? Why? Why did you leave me? I wasn't going to hurt you. At least not any more than I already have. And I do apologize for that, Valentine. I was just like an excited kid in a candy store when I saw you. I couldn't help myself. Didn't want you to run. But now, you did anyway. Don't you care about how that makes me feel? When I got back home from trying to stop the boat, didn't work, by the way, thanks for asking, and I found the cell door open. That hurt. It really did. That hurt my feelings. Don't you care about that? Or are you that fucking selfish?
The monster began to patrol up and down the aisles of cubicles, searching, hunting. He stepped right past Val, who remained hidden with her back against the cubicle, trying her best not to breathe loudly. Nightingale's sledgehammer clipped a painting of a village with wisteria trees, knocking it slightly askew, which caused Valentine to habitually release her breath at the sight of it. Nightingale heard the noise, turned, spotted her. But instead of killing her on the spot, turned back and adjusted the painting evenly.
I can see you're like me. That shit kind of bugs me too.
He told her, his grin wide, his glowing blue eyes settling on her. Then he spun back around and smashed it to pieces with his sledgehammer, causing Val to yelp, but also rise with Dougie's hunting knife. She held it out in front of her, her hands shaking. Nightingale burst out laughing, and then took a deep breath.
Okay. I'm gonna bash your brains in now.
But just as he lifted the hammer above his head, Miles tackled Nightingale back into one of the cubicles, causing it to collapse under their weight. The two of them fought over the sledgehammer, Miles on top. Valentine didn't hesitate. She charged forward and plunged the knife deep into Nightingale's side. The monster let out a pained yell as she twisted, pulled, and drove it in again. This time, however, Nightingale grabbed her hand, holding the knife, kicked Miles back, and drew with his free hand his pistol. Valentine staggered back as the bullet pierced her shoulder, blood running down her arm and drip, drip, dripping into the shag carpet. Nightingale drew the knife with a scream and tossed it away just as Val leapt forward and kicked down hard with the heel of her shoe, nearly blinding Nightingale. But the monster turned his head away at the last moment. Miles rushed his target again and pushed the handle down into the officer's throat, who began making an audible choking sound, which grew even worse when Miles began to slam his hand over and over against it in his attempt to crush the monster's windpipe. Nightingale tried to aim the gun at Miles' head, but the thief was quick, reaching up and ejecting the clip with his left hand, and ducked as the bullet in the chamber narrowly missed. The cop cursed weakly and began to bleed profusely from his mouth, nose, and eyes when Valentine jumped in and threw punch after punch into the man's face, quickly changing the shape of his nose through sickening crunches. It looked like they were about to win, when Nightingale let out a horrific screech and backhanded Valentine away, sending her crashing through the wall of the nearby cubicle. The monster took another solid punch to the face by Miles, but sent the result of the thief's work back at him through a spray of bloody spit that blinded the man. Nightingale kicked his attacker away, thrust his sledgehammer forward, and caught Miles in the knee with the tip of the heavy metal, cracking and bending the man's leg at an awkward and painful angle. Miles screamed and fell while Nightingale rose, and then brought the hammer down on his face with a sickening crunch. Valentine stood for a moment in shock. Before snapping herself out of it, she ran past the carnage, picked up Dougie's knife, and ran to the back of the room. She saw an elevator, pulled it open, risking a quick glance back at the approaching Nightingale, and leapt forward, grabbing the thick wires. The climb was painful, her burned palm feeling as if it may peel away. Yet she climbed, and climbed, and climbed, and Nightingale followed. When she reached the top, she leapt through a small opening onto the floor above and started to run. Nightingale was close behind. Valentine reached a spot where there was a gap she had to cross in a hole in the wall that revealed the blue city beyond. This was an obstacle that she would not have been able to cross were it not for the ladder that spanned the distance. She quickly moved across it, exhaling as she did, and kicked the ladder away just as Nightingale reached the edge. The ladder fell, clattering the whole way down. Nightingale just stood there. staring at her. Then he quickly drew his gun. Empty. The man stared at the gun, then back at her.
Well, shit. You're lucky I ran out of bullets!
He yelled across the gap and staggered slightly, holding the wound at his side.
I guess that's it. I can't jump that.
Nightingale leaned against the sledgehammer as if it were a crutch or a cane, and slowly the monster turned and began to walk back the way he came.
I hope you don't make it. I hope you slip and fall.
Valentine wobbled, weak, through the final stretch. She was so tired, and the blood loss only made it worse. She scrambled up through the building, hiking through levels affected by the push and pull of the blue room. Some of the rooms wildly out of place. One in particular, as she had to make a slight descent, caught her off guard. When she stepped into it, it was cracked the whole length down. For a long time she stared, and the more she did, the more horrified she became. Worse than anything she had ever felt. Even after everything she had been through. This room, this place, it was infinite, never-ending, and nothing. Nothing at all. She knew that was all that would greet her. All that was there. Down that long, cracked corridor. Nothing that went on forever. She finally had to run away from the nothing, stepping over the crumbling rubble, desperately trying to escape the nothing. And she did. Val eventually found herself on the roof of the building, the wind greeting her, not calmly like before, but violently like the storm from the Room of Tears. And in this violent wind, she had to face one last obstacle. The crane. The construction crane leading from this building to the next. The tallest building in the city. And so she climbed. The entire walk was hair-raising. She placed each foot as carefully as she could, ducked when she had to, and crawled when her strength of body and mind left her. The whole time, she controlled her breathing. She knew if she gave into the panic, she would never stand again. And then, she made it. The room was empty besides the swinging man, hanging from a noose. Still with flesh on his skin, no smell, no rot. Below him was a book. Valentine opened that book. She read the name inside. Atticus. Her heart sank. And for the first time, she felt true defeat when she read his words. Dear reader, I did try. Truly I did. For 30 years I strove to flee this place. Yet there is no exit, no escape, no hope to be found within these walls. And I fear I have no strength left within me. I yield. I have nothing more to give. I simply give up. Valentine watched him, slowly swaying back and forth. She just stared and stared. For one whole day she stared, until her stomach began to grumble. Then she found herself too hungry. Dougie's knife was used to cut his clothes away, to carve his skin, to cut the flesh into bite-sized pieces. It was a mess. She was a mess. She didn't bother trying to clean herself. She didn't care anymore. She had tried the elevator in the corner, same as Atticus. Didn't work. She didn't even know what she was fighting for anymore. Didn't know why she was trying to survive. Just chewed on Atticus. And then, as she swallowed the last piece that finally filled her belly, the elevator door opened. It took a moment for Val to turn and face it. It took a moment for her to rise to her feet, to walk inside, for the doors to close. She didn't believe it was true. It had to be a dream. Or she was dead. The gunshot wound had to have taken her despite the on-the-spot cleaning she did with the alcohol from the restaurant she stored in Dougie's backpack. But when the elevator doors opened and she stepped out, the shock on the people's faces, the wide berth they gave her.
Is she okay? I don't know.
She knew.
Should we call 911?
It was real. She had escaped. She walked like a robot programmed to do so, into the cerulean window office, into the boss's office. The whole place quiet as she walked. She sat down across from the man with the blue tie and a black suit, a sterling silver owl brooch pinned to that suit. The man looked at her and smiled. "You're hired." And Valentine smiled back. Hey guys, this is Lucas, the creator of Adam's Lost Journal. I literally just finished the Blue Room. That was so... that took so long. That was so frustrating. I can't tell you how many hours of editing I put into that. I specifically wanted to make this one easier, like, you know, the lack of the sound effects, which, yeah, I did pull back on that, but somehow the editing process was so much worse than everything else I've done. Like I said, I thought the smell of rain was bad, but this was just, oh my god. Right at the end, too. It was like when all these little tiny mishaps kept happening, and I kept just like, you know, just crunching up my face and just going like, please, just let this be over. Come on. Like, I'm proud of it. I'm ready to move on to something else, and this is just taking up so much of my time. But damn. Yeah. Okay. First off, I just want to tell you something a little bit about the Blue Room. This was based off of a dream I had about like 15 years ago or something like that. It was really weird. I went to sleep one day and basically just had this dream. Yeah, this dream sequence, which I tried to make as accurate as possible to what actually happened in the dream. Obviously, some stuff I made up, you know, just to kind of add a little bit of spice to the dream, whatnot. Obviously, for anybody that's a fan of liminal spaces or the back rooms, you can see a little bit of the inspiration in there. That being, like, you know, the music that plays when she first gets in there, the music you're listening to right now. And also like a company kind of behind it, you know, trying to figure out what this thing actually is, what this place is. But besides that, yeah, like I said, this was a dream I had about 15 years before the backrooms was even a thing, or at least definitely a long time. So, yeah, I was at least proud there. But I still wanted to give a little bit of inspiration, like a little shout out to it with that. But yeah, also speaking of shout outs, it's time to thank our cast. This is the first time I've had multiple voice actors, which is one of the reasons why it took so freaking long. God dang, that one scene in the police station took me so long to edit just because of all the different voices I had to go back and forth with. And yeah, that was insane. So yeah, the first person, Valentine, obviously our main character, Val, was voiced by Crystal Durham. She did a good job. She did a really good job. Nightingale, voiced by David Gibbons. He did an amazing job with that. I knew he was definitely the right person to cast for that messed up, wacky villain. And then we've got Alice, which was Valentine's sister. That was played by Kaylin. There were a few characters like her where they weren't going to have very many lines, kind of like Lark a little bit, and Atticus. I was going to get a couple of other people to voice them, but they just took too long in responding, so I ended up having to do Lark and Atticus's voice. And last but not least, Miles, who was played by the YouTuber Dreadisle. He's a pretty big YouTuber, so I'm sure, yeah, he'll want me to give a little shout out for that, to check out his channel. So I'll make sure, you know, ahead of time to ask him if he does indeed want me to leave a link or something like that. But besides that, yeah, he does these cool little VR spend the night videos and stuff like that. But yeah, everybody did a great job. Absolutely everybody. And yeah, I need after all that, I need a fucking break. I'm going to take a long break and do just some small stuff for a little bit. I am going to still try to release episode 12 by the end of the year. I was saying I was going to do episode 12 and 13, but I'm just going to do 12. I need something simple, which 12 should be very easy. I know I said that about the Blue Room, but whatever. Anyways, I'm going to get off here. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to eat something. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And please like and subscribe. And I guess I'll see you around for the next one. Peace out, and I hope you guys have a great day. Oh yeah, also, I totally forgot. Space, stop calling. Okay, well, anyways. Sorry, my cat was attacking the couch. She's ripped it to shreds. But no, one thing I was going to say also, I forgot a few things that I was going to describe. Like when I was describing my dream that I had, I didn't mention the fact that when I went to sleep, it literally felt like I was there for like a year. Like when I woke up, I was so disoriented. I couldn't believe, you know, what that dream that I just went through. It was so bizarre. And that's why it's not really straight up just said in the story, but Valentine was there for about a year in the real world. Like she was missing for a year, even if time was a little different for her. Another thing is that this story obviously tackles OCD, but it goes a little deeper than you probably are thinking. Like while I left it mainly, like I didn't want to go into too many descriptions about it because I didn't want to just absolutely overload the story with that. Like it was mainly like just focusing on her descriptions of what she deals with, like, expelling the air out of her breath, which is something I did when I was a kid when somebody would interrupt me or something weird would happen. That's one of the things I would do and like fidget with my fingers when it comes to my OCD. But another thing is that it's basically weaved into the entire story. Like every intricate detail you hear has something to do with OCD for the most part. Like from the rooms that they go to, from certain descriptions, from the writing itself, even the narration, like the rushed feeling that the story has in certain parts. It's meant to portray OCD, like the repetition of certain phrases being used again, certain words being said over and over again. Like scenes like where you probably thought to yourself, didn't he just say this? Didn't he just do this? Like, repetition actually does play a part in the actual Adam's Lost Journal series as a whole, but I really kind of wanted to dive into this and, expand on it a little bit. Hopefully I didn't overdo it. There were parts where I felt like I did. I was even going to say something about that. Once again, I just forgot. But I feel like when I went back and looked at it again, I was like, holy shit, man. I I fucking did that. I feel like I made it work pretty well. And a lot of it was intentional. Some of it wasn't. This thing that happens all the time when I'm writing where I unintentionally like do something and I look back and I was like, hey, that actually worked, And so I'm just very proud of the way this one came out. Yeah, like I said. So that was it. I was just adding this little addition at the end of what I had already said. So yeah, thank you guys once again. I hope you have a great day and peace out.